We are streaming live for StarFall 2029. Hoping to do our sound check as we do. If you are listening and can hear us, let us know that there is reverb, echo, silence, or any other capacity so that you may actually hear what we want to broadcast tonight. Once we have that going, we will start the show. I am watching the comments now for you to say so. Meredith is along for the ride as always. She'll be jumping in for Stop the White Noise later, but she can say hello right now.
Good evening, everybody. I'm really glad to be here with you tonight, Jonathan.
Well, thank you very much for saying that. It has been a beautiful day here in Rockford, Illinois. Third day maybe without rain after a summer filled with rain. And you know what I saw on the trees today?
Tell me.
I saw colored leaves. Did you see that across over that way?
I was noticing that myself, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and on that note, Gary, thank you so much, says Soundcheck is good. We're ready for story time on the roll tonight. I hope you are. StarFall 2029, episode 235, chapter 1, The Signal in the Stone on the way.
What you're about to witness is one of the most sinister-sounding intros to a trailer to one of the greatest epics ever produced in the history of television.
In the last days of 2027, as the world celebrated under the cold flicker of digital screens, few could see the ominous signs beneath the veneer of progress. Across the globe, in bustling cities and quiet suburbs, the hum of technology masked the subtle shifts, unnoticed by most, but not by Jonathan Collar. From the sanctuary of his shadowed study, surrounded by the comforting weight of old books and the harsh glow of computer monitors, Jonathan pieced together a lattice of truths that would have shattered a lesser man. The year had been one of quiet dread, a time when the increasing erratic patterns in the global stock market and the mysterious fluctuations in the power grids signaled something far more sinister than mere technical glitches. In the shifting tides of social media, Jonathan saw the telltale signs of manipulation, subtle nudges steering public opinion like a rudder in a storm. To the untrained eye, these were anomalies. To Jonathan, they'd become the fingerprints of the Insidii, a shadowy cabal woven into the fabric of history, older than governments, greater than nations. Jonathan first stumbled upon the Insidii's trail years ago, buried in the footnotes of an etymology textbook, a wild fantasy that led to audacious myths. Yet the deeper he dug, the more the references came together in radical coincidence. The more the frameworks proved themselves true. The more he realized whatever one might say about myth, the world of men faced dark, apocalyptic realities. The Insidii had been there since at least Florence, but some claimed more ancient ritual ties, lurking in shadows, guiding the hands of kings and emperors, moving pieces on the chessboard of history. Video games and movies always played light with it, and the addiction to escape kept most content with their circuses and popcorn. But now, with 2027 rolling to an awkward close, the newly normalized world, only just recovered from the 2020 worldwide event, were about to be hit by a black swan again. Long after leaving the lexicons for matrix of internet knowledge and AI sidekicks, Jonathan knew now the central plan was an artifact, a gemstone, called the Moonstone. It had passed through the hands of conquerors and criminals alike. Legend as old as India, a bedtime tale for those who traffic in powerful secrets. Was it a relic of some ancient civilization, perhaps Noah's Atlantis? Or more of a cosmic rock like the Al-Hajar al-Aswad of the Masjid al-Haram? To Jonathan, even if it was a fraud, its story alone was still a weapon that could tip the balance. His study of chaos and old books, living things and needful technologies brought a fusion of past and present into a mirrored battle that he knew lay ahead for all mankind. His monitors flickered with data years in the collecting, each snippet another piece in the puzzle as he desperately tried to solve it, all hinging on the Moonstone, and they were close, too close, to unlocking its secrets. And that was to say nothing of Apophis. Apophis, a still distant, almost forgotten space rock, hurtling toward its intercourse with Earth and the Moon in April of 2029, no longer seen by any of the public as the harbinger of doom given as its namesake by the UN scientists who first discovered it in 2004. Wikis everywhere now assured the conspiracy-minded that the asteroid posed no danger to the planet. Once upon a time, vaccines couldn't cure colds, and 2027 was a world of low trust and high stakes, even at Thanksgiving dinner, with inflation out of control, foreign powers openly manipulating elites, and the vast majority of the populace too addicted to their talking images to do much more than make another meme about it. This was all according to plan. For years, through a variety of state embedment, the Insidii had been quietly preparing, manipulating, engineering, using both real and manufactured crises to nudge the world toward a single inevitable conclusion: the rise of a unified totalitarian regime, a new world order, one beast to rule them all. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, the dim light from his monitors casting shadow across the room. His mind raced. The state had always been a vague concept, a shadowy force that people trusted in and paid taxes to, but few could define. Now, as the pieces came into place, Jonathan saw the full picture. The devil in the details was not a single entity, but a web, a dispersed authority network of factions and intersections, cabals and cults, personalities and tribes, each with its own agenda, but all herded toward the same goal: complete control by their betters, that is, by those with the will and the power to seize more will and power. Central to it all was the Moonstone. Whatever kings and conquerors may have known, whatever Moses or Solomon might have perceived, the 21st century and its tools built on advancements in quantum physics brought its true potentialities to new light. This was more than just a gem. It was a conduit, a focal point for enhancing the flow of testosterone between the spinal fluid and the lymph nodes, unlocking all manner of previously unbelievable human potentials in the attuned wielded, even though the potency had its power to lasso you the moon. In hands of a shadowy cult of ancient bloodlines, obscene wealth, and an endless labyrinth of mixed allegiances, NGOs, and influencers, the Moonstone was the linchpin. According to one file, a scratchy film of Project Paperclip scientist laughing about the National Socialist takeover of the Allies from within, playing off the known divide between Stalin and the West, and manipulating the newly formed United Nations to adopt many of the Nazi global agenda as their own Agenda 2030, and banking on the public's inability to tell the difference between a real asteroid crisis and a fake one in order to seal the deal of giving up human rights in exchange for the safe promises of the state. The turntail laughed, told the story, and then mentioned the asteroid. The asteroid. His favorite part. The footage could have been a deep fake, but there were other sources recorded by insiders of the Bohemian Grove, drunkenly boasting of their master, who had already channeled the Moonstone's quantum-altering properties at Apophis in a long plan to steer it off of its course to miss the Earth and into a direct impact with the Earth. The thrall claimed that the real plan was the great summoning of something even worse, a creator being from another dimension who had opened contact with them after early experiments with nuclear weapons in the deep Pacific apparently opened a portal to the 5th level of perdition over a small stretch of beachy island. Whether or not Dormammu was really on his way, the Moonstone was powerful enough as a story alone to move the most elite in the world to hunger for its bidding. Without doubt, unstable, its energies unpredictable and deadly, it held an ancient course about which Jonathan had never found anything more satisfactory and odd than a reference to a verse in Job and another in Ecclesiastes. He could make neither heads nor tails of any of it. The weight of that curse might as well be pressing down on him, for though time was slow and seasons long, the clock was ticking, and time in 2027 was running out. He needed to act, but he could not do it alone. Allies were essential, people he could trust, people with the skills and knowledge to help him solve the Insidii before it was too late. Some of them might be old friends, people he'd trusted in a past life, but others he knew would be new, brought together by shared understanding of the stakes. Jonathan looked at the map of connections pinned to his wall, a tangled web of names, places, and events, all with the same conclusion. The Insidii had to be stopped, and the only way was to get the Moonstone before they did. It was hidden away, guarded by layers of story, deception, legend, and deceit. It would test the bravest of souls. But Jonathan was ready. He'd spent years preparing, gathering, honing his every skill, and now was the time. The fate of the world depended not only on him, but on all who would hear the message and believe. He knew he could not outmaneuver the Insidii on his own. He knew that to unlock the secrets of the Moonstone, to inherit the power to save humanity from the darkness of the age, the answer would have to be given to him. The world needed to be saved. So Jonathan gave himself to prayer. As he stood and walked to the window, staring out at the water, the words of Psalm 35 held all the tenacity and rage of the lunacy battling to engulf him beneath the casino of the American soul. The lights of Rockford kept too many stars from showing, but Spica was bright, a beacon of hope from an older story still. The harvest of bounty borne by the Virgin, as she is chased by the dragon across the sky. A meet and proper parable for a world teetering on the edge. The Moonstone was the key, and if Jonathan Collar was to find it, then he was going to need help. Maybe Jesus would open his own portal in the sky and put an end to it all. But if not, as had often been the case, Jonathan knew that his answer was likely to come in the form of a few totally unexpected and most marvelous persons. We'll be right back. Well, we're back. I knew this would happen at some point in the show. Here we go. While they're all losing their minds, let's play a game called StarFall 2029. Your weapon is your mind. Your fuel is the word. Burn fewer bridges. Patch more walls. Tend to your nets, fishers of men, for today is the day of justice. Today is the day of judgment. Today is the day of Jubilee. StarFall 2029 is a storytelling, live-action, role-playing gamification of discipleship by biblical literacy in the fine radio tradition of Orson Welles, with a true Scots understanding of George Orwell and a touch of Joe Rogan, the Bible answer man for spice and space. Sola Scriptura, Pentecostal Pokemon Go with the Bible in your hand. I'm saying it. StarFall 2029 is a parabolic ontological rule set for hard resetting the in-house dialogue of the remaining Protestant Christian churches of goodwill with the true lore of the Bible, that is the epic wisdom of the Psalms, Proverbs, and red letters, a gateway to salvation in Jesus' mighty name for all of us. Do not forget you may dash, duck, grapple, pray, hide, ready, search, read, stabilize, aid, use, make, break, offend, cast out, and raise up. But do not forget we live in a sci-fi, steampunked, Wild West, wasteland, cosmic horror, tribulation of machine-induced madnesses, pollution-laden systems, and a white tower, great society, land grab, casino, sleepwalking your neighbors to destruction with handheld brainwashing devices, feminine victimhood, communist storytelling as power, and a cult of popcorn and politics lapping up every next revelation the talking image throws your way with a meme or three. Jonathan McAdam Fisk is my name. I am your host, Magistri Divinitatis, and tonight I want to talk to you about two things: scarcity and influence. Now that we actually got the sound working, hallelujah to that. Scarcity and influence. The bit on scarcity is going to come from a book by a guy named Aguirre. You can find this on Amazon.com. It's about the collapse of Argentina in 2003, a first world nation becoming a complete warlord-torn frontier due to the elites deciding to believe in the power of what we now call modern economics, what they also call communism, what really should be called bad kingdom theft. It's really is bad kingdom is what it is. But what happens in those kinds of situations where a government that's basically a bank with an army decides to make their bank untrustworthy so that they steal from all of their customers and then no one will do business with them anymore. What happens when that happens is there's a run on the bank, right? There's a lack of money. There's lack of liquidity in the system, and that leads to scarcity. All right. So I'm going to talk about here scarcity is a wide-ranging idea, but again, I'm drawing this from the Aguirre book. So scarcity, excuse me, Meredith, I am getting a headache. Would you grab some of that Gen Xa? I don't get paid to say that out of the closet for me there and help me out. Thank you so much. Scarcity is jet fuel for irrational behavior. And if you don't remember when everyone was like trying to buy toilet paper because there was a virus coming from China that was going to cause all these problems, and it did. I'm not going to say it didn't, right? There's certainly 2020 was a big event. But toilet paper was not what we all needed to stock up on at the moment. That was not the thing, right? But everybody remembers, I hope you remember, how you couldn't buy toilet paper for like a month and a half. Like suddenly you had a scarcity issue with toilet paper because people were afraid of there being a scarcity issue with toilet paper. Scarcity is jet fuel for irrational behavior in general. When people are afraid they will not have something, they act crazy and fast. When they know they will not have something, when something's being taken from them, they lose their mind. Human societies are unavoidably made up of very complex systems. These complex systems, because they're built of humans who are sinful, broken, selfish, and evil, are fundamentally and principally fragile. That is, they break. Civilizations break. And inevitably, they fail. And the Bible is a testimony to this. The Bible is a testimony to the resurrection of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, whom we adore, whom I praise, his holy name, whom you should too. The Bible is also a tome of wisdom from the ancients that talks about this world very, very clearly and will make you wise beyond your years if you give it the time of day. One of the things it makes very clear is that civilizations fail for two reasons that are always the same reason. They abandon God, period, like godlessness, right? As opposed to godliness. I'm not even saying like Baal, like worshiping Baal, that's bad, okay? That's bad. But like worse than not worshiping Baal is just becoming godless, like not even caring. Not even caring. They become godless, and when they become godless, the way they do it at the top, the kings, is with the money, with the imbalanced scales, so that the guy at the bottom has an unfair cut of an unfair share and not a chance in the world for him or his kids to be anything less than slaves. This happens again and again in history, and God destroys those countries. Yeah, they inevitably fail. When they fail, this is a crisis. The crisis is horrible, especially for those who are unprepared for the crisis. But as, politicians well know, and you ought to know if you're a parent, every crisis is an opportunity for growth. In fact, the opportunities for growth presented in crises would otherwise not be there. If you do not struggle, if you do not suffer, you will never be strong. Crises are more difficult than seasons of peace, but crises are what make seasons of peace possible. How does a king reign in peace but with the lessons he's learned by war? If crisis is coming our way as a people, which Apophis certainly is a crisis. Apophis. Be worried, everybody. That rock, it's on its way. Crisis is already here all around us. Crisis is what you make of it. Crisis is, who is your God? When Rabshakeh stands at the gates, is this the end of you or the end of Assyria? It kind of depends on who you're praying to now, doesn't it? Survival is escape, and vice versa. The thing that's most scarce right now is places people are not trying to escape. That's why you go into your phone, right? It's why you turn on the television. It's why you watch the sports. It's why you listen to the music. It's why you pour yourself a cup of coffee. You're trying to escape. But from what? That's what most of us probably don't even know. From what? And it was from your society. It might be from your tribe, and for some of us, it's from our own houses. But what is certain is that living in a life of constant escape is living in a life of constant survival, and that ought never be confused with normal or good. That means you live in a bad time. There's only one thing man should do in a bad time is get on his knees and pray to Jesus hard. No, he's listening. He's a good king. He's answering. He absolutely has us prepared for this. He is ready to go. Everything is here for us. So scarcity, again, is an opportunity. It's an opportunity if you see it coming and you're prepared. That's what wisdom gives you the capacity to do. It's an opportunity even if you didn't see it coming, because you can always pray to Jesus and know he planned it for your good. Now, scarcity, now influence. It's from a book called Influence, which you can find and read. It's a terrifying work about how the salesmen and thieves manipulate you against your will to pay them their money with a regular and steady hand. It's really a book on how they exploit us. And reading it won't help you be better necessarily at avoiding it, because what they exploit are human capacities that are inbuilt. Here's an example. You can try this on your own, and maybe it'll prove to be not as perfect as the numbers and the stats in the book say. But what the book says is that in studies show and find that if you are asking someone for a favor, any favor, is your best friend or you're on the street, you walk up and you ask for a favor. If you say, why? I need 25 cents because I'm trying to build a spaceship to get to the moon. You increase your odds of reception by 95%. They are going to give it to you. Why? Why is that? That has to do with the way that human society is built to understand and believe in the value of debt and charity. But unfortunately, what happens is that, as the book Influence shows, exploiters, we call them salesmen, marketers, they've learned how to read those things that are inbuilt in us as a society to protect us, and to use them for their own personal advantages. So let's define exploitation as the predatory manipulation of human action with knowledge of triggers and a will to mimic the roles that trigger them. Now, I'm going to say that again because that's kind of deep language there, right? Exploitation is when a human acts as a predator on another human and manipulates them by using known social, psychological, instinctual triggers with the will to do them as a mimic for the sake of manipulating the role. Now, ethology is what we're talking about here. It's the study of the natural animal social ecology. Okay? All species, including man, rely on autoreactive fixed response recognition patterns. Click, whir. Bark, bark, okay. You hear it, you do it, or you see it, you act. These social recognition patterns are relegated to the subconscious as a means of mitigating the overwhelm that would come from paying attention to everything at once. So much of our communication as humans, we don't even see or maybe even feel, or we feel it, but we don't know that we feel it. Rather, we just react to it. Someone moves toward you on the couch, you shift a little bit, right? That kind of thing. Such instinct is a pack positive sum. That is, it works for the good of all of us. It works for the good of all of us until the introduction of the trickster, who by virtue of observation variegates himself, drawing denigration into the equation, right? The liar whose conscience is seared. So here's one of these things that people can and do take advantage of, and I suggest you do not take advantage of it, but see the advantage of it as good for society where it's built into us. This is called the reciprocity principle, or I think of it as the pack as power principle. And this is what I mentioned earlier, that humans experience a universal pressure to repay kindnesses. There's a web of indebtedness that we live in, with the exception of maybe the free samples at Costco, which you're going there and you're paying to go there so you can pay for stuff that's there, so it's not really that free, right? The free sample as an idea is, here, take one, then you'll buy 5. And we do this as a matter of instinct. Gifts, in fact, make you irresistible, even to your enemies. And this is an obligation. This is a science. I'm not saying this is my opinion. You can get angry at me, yell at me, tell me I'm wrong, whatever. That's fine. That's your opinion. But like this is what the science is, that humans are obligated by a web of indebtedness that makes us a pack by trusting that if someone gives me something, I'm supposed to give it back, or give something back of equivalent value, or that later they're going to get it back. This fact that uninvited debt has to exist ensures that we live in a safe society where the idea that giving, receiving, and repaying is normal, that we all understand that we all do give, receive, and repay. This provides us a group competitive advantage against other groups that don't give, receive, and repay, right? It makes for a natural inclination to the division of labor. That is, I'll do that work if you do this work, that kind of thing. And its positive result binds confidence in the interdependency as expectation. That is, you grow in trust with each other as you work together and find that giving, receiving, and paying benefits the whole group, right? So the obligation to receive a gift as a social principle ensures the obligation to repay. And this is stronger than our instinct for fair trade, which means, and this is what they know, we'll pay more than what we have to pay in order to be free of the implication that we owe. Now, again, you may not be able to turn that into something right now. But what I'm telling you is that there are these click-worm mechanics, these instinctual realities that are among us. And if you understand them as built there by God, say, first use of the law, as it were, that they're incredibly good. And the reciprocity principle, the fact that the pack does well by giving, receiving, and repaying, both in terms of free gifts and in terms of understanding value, that is, there is no free gift outside of the grace of Jesus and forgiveness. There is no free gift. If I give you food, it's because you're going to do this later. It's always the way it's going to be, right? When we understand that, it's good for all of us. It benefits us all. That's the reciprocity principle. So also stereotyping. You can call this the standardization principle. This is the mandatory capacity that you have to act without thinking in order for you as an individual in any community to survive without having to rethink everything all the time. So there's this big thing called racial profiling, which people do to me all the time because I'm very white. And so they obviously think that I'm white and believe that I'm white and believe all the things about white people when they look at me, right? And what that is, you can call it racial profiling, you can call it racism, or you can call it stereotyping, which is what the series The Simpsons is like built on. And it's kind of the genius of it is that they get it quite right a lot of the time. And it's somewhat funny how quirky we all are in how alike we all are, even when we're all very different than each other. And I'm not suggesting that Homer Simpson is a good picture of what a American father ought to be, but then again, he might just be what most American fathers are with their meme capacity and all of this. So all this is to say then, you automatically have prejudicial judgments about things in life so that you don't have to think every 3 seconds about what you're going to do next and what is that a tree or is that a dog? I'm not sure, right? Like you eventually just start to know, right? This is called stereotyping, the standardization principle. It's good. The inescapable complexity of daily human needs absolutely demand that we relegate some of our operations to autopilot. Okay, this is good, but this is what they then take advantage, is the autopilot. So our pre-thunk solutions are a wisdom that becomes a habit, even a history, a legacy, a culture, a world of communication and interaction going on all around us right below the surface. So one of the ways then that this gets used, or another kind of event that happens with the reciprocity principle, is something called shunning or shaming, which all groups do in one form or another, especially to those who they perceive to be tricksters or traitors. Shame is the group instinct tool for mitigating those who violate reciprocity. So when you won't pay back what you owe, when you in fact have done wrong, you are to be ashamed of yourself. And the way that happens is the pack, the group, will sort of like get quieter around you and sort of look away and send signals of discomfort. The psychic soul cost of that debt on the animal, you, is so all-consuming that you will apologize. You will do what you can to not receive that shame anymore. You will accept the shared rules as a mutual concession so you can be part of the security of the herd, and you'll be willing to compromise in the present then for the assurance of the future benefits. Either that or you'll be out and on your own. Here's another principle from the book. It's called the compromise principle. And that's that if you're ever asked, this one's really good, actually. If you think about this as a way to set up your sale, right? If you're actually a salesman, feel free to use this. I mean, it's in the books. When forced to retreat, ask for something else as a concession. This is say, so I'm begging for something on the street, right? Can I have $10? No. Well, do you have any food? Now I feel bad that I didn't give you the $10, so I'll give you the food if I have it. It's called the compromise principle. It works. If you want something, don't ask for what you want. Ask for something else, and then ask for what you want. You will, again, at a percentage rate, magically up your sales pitches to almost everybody, right? You're trying to sell this. Don't you want this? Okay, well, here's this cheaper one over here. They do that all the time naturally, right? And so what you can see here again is a couple things. First off, it's just unwise to try to get what you want out the gate. Just don't do it. With friends, neighbors, family, enemies, whatever. Don't just go out and be like, I want this, right? Instead, see the value of compromise. See the value of letting people know what you need, and if they can't do it, asking for less, right? That's good. And then it goes with this thing called the contrast principle, which is seeing that when you define the differences, it's always to your advantage. Or if you go first, you get to set the standard. When you get to take 80% at the front, then the remaining 20 doesn't matter that much, right? He who goes first has the advantage. We live in an eye for eye, tooth for tooth reality. So when asked to retreat, that's the time to ask for what you really want. On your way, I'll happily go, but just give me this. Understand that reciprocity is the thing that really matters. That is, there is a debt of giving that we all owe each other, and without it, we all hate each other and tear each other apart. Yeah? And from there, remember that pack shunning and shame need to be forgiven in Jesus' name, and yet discipline and obedience and all this group instinct as a secure herd. We don't want to throw that out as we walk through this valley of tears under his word. There we go. Scarcity and shame tonight here on StarFall 2029. Oh, and I still have a headache. It's starting to go away a little bit, but we're gonna move into Stop the White Noise session with Meredith so that I can at least stop trying to talk while having a headache for a moment and think it through. It came on during the mid part of the story, which I really enjoyed doing. I hope you all enjoyed it too, and more to come. But not tonight, and I'd like you to talk so I can just take a sip of the soda.
Yeah, it's good to be here with everybody again. As you were reading your story to us, a verse came to mind that I will share now. But first, I'm going to look it up in my Bible. It's John 16, verse 33. And there we read Christ's words that say, "These things I have spoken to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world." And I think that speaks very clearly to any fear that whatever man, the news, media, even our neighbor or a friend wants to tell us that is meant to alarm us or get us kind of off our game. So it's comforting to know that we have a Savior who has overcome the world. He also knows that we will face trials.
And we're here for such a time as this. It's either over or almost over, or he's got a great, great, great game planned for us, and it's not our destruction, it's our salvation in real time, along with our salvation at the end of the world, but in real time, in the present too. He's the Savior of the living, not of the dead, and that he saves those who call on him today, from their enemies today, and that if he's going to let you be martyred, well then, I'm pretty sure you're going to know that ahead of time. You're going to maybe even want that. Yeah. And so for Christianity to remember, this is like the primary good news of the message. Not that you die and go to heaven, but that the God of the Jews is your God and wants you, Gentile, washing you with something better than circumcision, putting you into a blood better than that of Abel, right? All of that. I got so excited I forgot where I was going with it. But it's a certain reality, and for these latter days, with all the confusion and conspiracy we can play with, and I want to play with it, we are to believe that the way the ship sails through this is by just holding firm and fast together to our trust in his provision, daily bread, right? Next week's season, whatever comes, it's going to be in his hands. And then, so to believe that is good, even if it's crazy, even if it's zombies, then, well, pull up your pants, get working, it's time to go. And to know that he's there for you in all this. This is what I have found to be the most powerful discovery of Psalms and Proverbs reading post Lutheran seminary experience, post kind of law gospel framework experience. Would you shut that window for me? Well, now I'm going to be distracted by how I distracted you. Hallelujah.
You're talking about reading the Psalms post 2020.
I'm talking about finding in the Psalter something that the Lutheran confessions talk about but don't give you. They talk about it a lot, but they don't give it to you. And that is the belief that call on him and he will answer you. Call on him and he will answer you. Not he answered you long ago with theories about how it all works and the Jesuits are wrong. Okay, that's all true too. but it's true so that you will know that call on him and he will answer you. Lift up your voice. Speak his name. Believe that the words of the scriptures are more powerful than your own. I continue to be just flabbergasted by the number of Christians who don't like psalmic language, prophetic language, when you just use it. They'll accuse you of not making sense, of saying things that liberals say, which is strange. Like there was a post about justice. It's like, just because the liberals get to use social justice, communist nonsense in order to destroy us all, means we don't get to talk about justice anymore. We're so ready to cut off our own nose to spite our face. And the time is ripe for us. I don't know that we're going to see worldwide conversions and nations of Christian power rising up to sweep the world with honor and truth. I mean, but what I know is that where we are between now and 2029, there are plenty of children who are to be taught to read the Proverbs and the Psalms and call on Jesus, who need to be fed and given skills with their hands so that the aged and infirm can be cared for and the next generation can be taught. And that needs to be done in such a way that we remember that we've forgotten many things. And perhaps it's time as Christians to ask ourselves, how locked into American society for everything that it is are we? And how willing are we to form our own tribes? I'm not talking about like you join me, you go do your own thing, but or whatever, locally where you are, you do your thing. But you intentionally forge out an identity that you're going to pass on to your kids. Rooted in your own history if you can, but rooted mostly in principles of truth. And that's precisely what we're doing with jiu-jitsu as a family, or I'm hoping to do. I can't guarantee it. I don't know what my kids will do. I don't know what they'll choose on their own. But I'm wanting to give our neighborhood, 2 generations down, wrestling with each other as just what they do, because of how good it is for the body, how good it is for the mind, how good it is for the people to be physically aware of themselves and able to handle their own bodies for the sake of self-defense and also stretching while you're at it. And so that's just me dreaming about what a future world run by Christians would look like. It wouldn't be communist calisthenics in the morning, but jiu-jitsu would just be how people roll. And, baseball, it's great. It's fine. But no, I think I want to check out. I think I want to check out of that society and choose something a little more valuable to everybody. Baseball is great in the backyard for the potluck or whatever, but what good is it to us to watch these overpaid children do drugs to outperform each other? And don't get me wrong, I love the sports. When I say I love the sport, I don't mean baseball. I mean the idea of sport itself. I love the moment. I love the underdog. I love March Madness for just that reason, because it's just the crazy, all of it upside down, topsy-turvy, win can, that guy who's given his whole life to just this moment, hit that 3 away, yes! But, and then what, right? Then he put down the beer and turn off the cable and, I got to deal with the kids who are in their own rooms watching their own stuff, right? For such a time as this, it's the time to choose your own way, make your own culture, be your own tribe. And so that's why I'm glad to be here with you, Meredith, raising our kids as we are, and to get a chance to share weekly with everybody something about that, because our kids are doing well, I think. The world's a crazy, mad place, and we as a family are chased by inherited sin, legacy sin that we have faced over the years, and has left its marks on all of us as we've come to terms with that. And so I think all that considered, they're doing incredibly well. They're church kids, they're pastor kids, which most people probably don't know, but it really ups your chances of being messed up. It's not the other way around. You would think it would up your chances of being normal and healthy, but it's not. It's not how it works. And it's not necessarily because of the guy even. It's because of the culture of the job, the kind of over attention the kids get, the kind of over criticism the kids get. They're expected to be at a higher level than everybody, and yet even when they do, they will continually feel that they are not good enough, because they're not really allowed to be trumpeted in front of everybody either. I don't get to go up in the pulpit and be like, my kids are better than your kids, right? So they get held to a high standard but aren't really praised for it. And so it's tough. It's a tough place. And I'm grateful for our children in their persons as they've come about, because they're so, Christian. And still listening to us. And I look at what other. I look at what the norm is in our civilization, and I know that's not that. And I'm grateful that our church is got a number of families with teenagers who I think all the teens, and they do listen to their parents. They do care about Scripture. They care about Jesus.
Yes.
But you and I are here, and you are the one that has put into practice so much of what I have envisioned for our kids over the years. So I'm glad to hear what you got tonight.
They wouldn't be where they are without your leadership. So that's, let's place the credit where credit is due. You had mentioned in the section on scarcity that crisis or suffering is a time for growth. And as our family has faced kind of the skeletons in the closet that you and I have brought to our marriage and then therefore to their lives, that trial has caused us to dig deeper into God's word and God's promises, to not put our hope in princes, but to put our hope in God's word and allow him to lead us daily. So, and as far as them listening to us, you had also mentioned in your section on influence how when in the natural human there is this desire to pay back. So if you are given a gift, then you feel the power or the pressure to repay. And that works in a family relationship as well. In that you are given a baby and you nurture the baby and care for the baby and give the baby a sense of worth and value. As that baby grows into a child, you then you continue to foster their curiosity by being curious with them and not shoving them away, but welcoming them up into whatever it is that you're doing at the time. And then once they are in their teen years, part of the reason that kids shut down is because that's the time when they actually need us to ask the questions about what they think, rather than what we did when they maybe were in the preteen stage, which is tell them what to think. Now it's time to ask what they think, and then through kind of a Socratic method where you're asking questions that leads the conversation to a conclusion that you desire, you lead them to discover or realize what you want them to know. But you lead them in such a way that they decide, or they believe that they have come to that conclusion on their own. That takes a lot of listening on the parents' part. It takes a lot of time on the parents' part.
Which modern parents don't have a lot of. And so that's the kind of thing I'm talking about when I say make intentional choices that distinguish you from the world around you based upon principles. And so the choice to have a stay-at-home mother, to have a woman who spends her time on the children 100% of the time, it's a sacrificial challenge. It's a lifestyle choice, and once chosen, it's hard to get out of it. I mean, people do, they shift, but being a homemaker, looked down upon by the 90s woman, the American woman, and yet something that I just don't know how you can raise kids without it. I know people do, and I know good kids come out from it. So I'm not saying it's not possible, but I don't know how, because I don't know. I know that our social dynamic is such that if we had not had a full-time psychologist attending to figuring out who we all were so that we could all grow together, I'm not sure we make it as a family. I mean, and let the insider or the outsider think what he thinks of that. But because of the modern world being what it is. And I just think back to the life that you and I were living 2016 with our kids, which was not bad. It wasn't evil, but we weren't addressing things. We were kind of ignoring things with the machines as our outlet to that, or I certainly was. But when I say we, I mean the family as a whole is operating in that space. And without having had a full-time parent in the space, we might never have even noticed in some ways, I think, right? And so you did, and you began dealing with it, I mean, very soon. And your attention to our children as people is something that is stunning to me, because while everyone knows another person's a person, so they can listen to me right now and be like, what's he talking about? But what I'm talking about is that a large percentage of people do not recognize other people as people in the same way they see themselves as people. and they certainly don't project upon them the same kind of charities and leniencies they give to themselves, or understanding of their place in life, that like a 2-year-old is not a 4-year-old.
Yeah,
can't operate.
Right, you touched on this thought in the section that you were talking about influence as well.
Mm-hmm.
And you talked about it as exploiting.
Mm-hmm.
We exploit our children. They are there to give us status. They are there, not the Fisk family, but we as Americans. Let me clarify that, because I don't need anybody like chopping that out and misquoting me. Right. As Americans, the society exploits our children.
Yeah.
I believe it is so that we can then have our familial ideas broken apart, so that the government then raises our children for us, and they become a cog in the wheel, or a part of the machine.
Western communism.
I have spoken to people who were outside of America growing up, and they've have more of a progressed version of that in their government. So I know that it's part of the, let's say, Western civilization mindset, post World War II, probably pre World War II as well. But what we've come from and seen a big influx of since World War II, with women going out of the home to help out, right? But then never coming back. So
Workers' paradise.
So exactly, your exploitation of the child is that you child give me a status that without a child I don't have, and now I will give you the needs that you have. I will provide for the needs that you have in order to grow you, but then I won't take the time to tell you that you're not in my way. I won't take the time to tell you how valuable you are to me without making you feel like, do you realize how much money I spent on diapering you? I mean, that's constantly this phrase that I've heard. Do you recognize how much I spent on diapers? Like, why does that matter? You're welcome. I don't know. It's not about how much another person costs me. It's about how much value that human has. God has entrusted that human into my life for me to influence in a positive way for him and for the child's good. And so we change our mindset as Christians. We see this, Psalm 139, like we have been wonderfully made by a God who doesn't make mistakes, right? And so is every single other person that you walk past. He has put every freckle, mole, wrinkle on you.
I was sitting at a light in Rockford today watching, I think it was a left turn, it was a long one, it was like four minutes or so, and I was watching all the cars turn right. On the other is Riverside and Alpine, maybe something like that. And there was a guy that was stopped. It started the train of thought, and he was stopped at the turn right. And then he went, and a whole bunch went after him. And he was in like a little sedan. It was kind of beat up, kind of Rockford Rusty sedan. And he probably was in his 30s. And he kind of was somewhere between, I used to be kind of good looking, but now I'm overweight. And I'm going to get bald soon, but I still have the top knot. And something else about, I couldn't tell what else was there in the car that made it clear, but it's like, okay, this guy doesn't go to church. This guy's got a rough life. This guy is Rockford. And Jesus loves that guy.
Amen.
And then he drove, and then it was person after person after person, and then they're as different as day and night. And every one of them, old fat Asian woman, young Mexican kid, on and on. Mm-hmm. And each one of them, what I was just enraptured by was first how much I hated them instinctually as a man because of the world I live in, because of the evil I know is here, because of the wickedness that lives in our homes and is making us grow up into barbaric and wretched people. And so I know what they're doing. I know what they're watching. I know what they're saying. I know what they're believing. I know how much they need to be saved. And I despise the wicked. And yet I also know Jesus died for us all, right? And so I have this moment where I see their wretched state that our government has indeed put them in, and how deplorable, Les Miserables, they are, actually. And then the parable of the merciful servant, the child put in the middle of the 12 men. And each one of them is as valuable to God as I am, which I'm glad to hear, because I don't tend to think I'm very valuable. But when I remember I'm as good as they are because he loves us all, then I get to be part of it too. And that's something I don't feel much. So that's right there in it with each of these people who you said moles and freckles. I mean, they were not good looking people. Their cars did not look like they smelled nice on the inside. They're the least of these. And every single one of them, and I just was praying, Jesus, how do I make a big enough microphone? How do I get in their ears? Well, StarFall 2029, here we are, as best we can do. But yeah. Paying attention to the child as the individual human, that is parenting from what I've seen. I've given us a lot of theory and framework and discipline, but I did not have the human capacity to see what we're talking about right now while I was still living inside of Skyrim. I didn't have it, too busy trying to get back to my real fake world.
And let's give you an example, listener, of what I mean. So schools started up for a lot of people, and that means there are kids.
Kid prison. Brief History of Power, classic, 6 episodes, Kid Prison, look it up.
So kids are going away from home for most of the day and then coming back in the afternoon. And there's that question of how was your day? And then it's fine. And, oftentimes the answers are really short. And our quest as parents is to draw information out. Here's an example that I can use for myself. When my child is sitting on the couch reading a book, I can either be like, what are you reading? Is that a trashy novel? Or I can say, oh, hey, tell me about the book you're reading. And then they'll say, oh, it's about this and that. Who's your favorite character? Well, Tanner's my favorite character. And then you have to listen to the answer. And then if they don't elaborate, say, why?
Yeah.
And then my my favorite question is, so in what you read today, how do you see the 10 Commandments either being upheld or discouraged? Is this author promoting ideas that go with our worldview or ideas that go against our worldview? So let's now, depending on their age, you're going to have to break that up for them. Does that, if they're in kindergarten, you're not going to have, you're not really going to have that deep of a
they're probably
conversation,
not
but you're
reading
going to be
books on
like,
their own quite
does
the same
Mr.
way.
Alligator steal from
Yeah.
his parents,
Yeah,
or
there you
does he lie to his parents, or does he tell the truth? Does Susie Turtle share her cookies with her friends, or does she take things from her friends? So the pulling information out of their life and then discussing it, and then before you know it, they're going to actually be coming to you with those really tough conversations. Mother, I saw this happen today at jiu-jitsu class, or the guys in the locker room are talking about this. What'd you say, son? Well, I said this, that, and the other thing. And you will be floored by the wisdom that comes out of this youthful heart, because you've put it in by God's grace over the years, by talking to them, not at them. And that's huge.
With them. Yeah. In conjunction and
We
exchange.
We can all smile and nod, but it takes a skillful speaker
It takes time.
to look at the audience and speak to the audience. I've spoken about this book several times. It's called Blink, and I don't know. I know Malcolm. Do you know the author's
Malcolm Gladwell.
name? Malcolm Gladwell. He is a psychiatrist.
Susie Turtle was a thief. Somebody says. Jack Zach.
Thanks,
J-Zac T. J-Zac T.
I love that you're with us tonight. Honestly, that just warmed my heart that you listened and then responded to me. But anyhow, so in Blink, he talks about this conference he went to, and one of the speakers comes out and he has his speech prepared, and he comes out like his pants are on fire, and he's talking a mile a minute and shoving information down their throats. He ends up going overtime, so nobody even has questions. But as Gladwell's looking around the audience, he's noticing, maybe 3/4 of the way through, maybe less than that, like halfway through, a lot of the audience has checked out.
Yeah, right.
Some are on their phones. Some are actually leaving and going to the restroom. Like, he's losing them.
It's that nightmare I have of church. I can't get church started. You know this one, right?
Yeah.
Where, like, it's so full and I can't get it started, and then they're walking away. I'm like, please, we're almost ready. I just have to find a battery or something.
Oh,
you know?
no.
I never know what it is. It's endless. Anyway.
Yeah. So then the next speaker comes on stage, and he's a British man. He has a kind of a thick accent, but he speaks very slowly and enunciates all of his words. Before he even begins his talk, however, he checks the mic and then asks if the people in the very far back row can hear him clearly. And once he gets a yes nod from them, then he proceeds with his talk. He goes through his notes, but then as he notices people losing interest, he says, you know what? I'm going to save that for after we have a little break. And he gives them a break so they can get up, wiggle around, come back. And honestly, he didn't get through all of his speech that he had prepared. But what he did was he spoke to them so they heard what he had to say.
Or they took away more of it.
And that's the key with
Yeah.
our kids. It's so easy to get adrenalized and just be like, I'm going to
When you were talking about
the
the naughty book, it's like, there's something that popped up there that's really helpful, I think. Like, it's important to, this is where seeing their person is really valuable. It's important to see them as a person distinct from the book they're reading that is really bad and horrible and all this. Like, yeah, but it's not them even though they read it. The child is still the child, and the child will come to terms with what was read. And if that's all the child ever reads and never learns to see it as filth, then that's bad. So how are you going to help them digest what they just ate? And in fact, if you ask and they're like, that tasted bad, then you're like, oh, did it now? Tell me why, because that'll drive home that it tastes bad. Whereas they may never have the cognition to even know they hated the book, even though they hated the book.
Yeah.
They might go back to it again and again thinking they liked it because they just haven't thought it through.
Mm-hmm.
You know, or if there were parts of it they liked the spaceship or something, you know?
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, I have kids in our rhetoric phase of life. Like that's the last brain development stage that you hit as a human growing up.
In theory.
That's where you're able to take all these things you've learned, the things you've memorized, the things you've observed, the things that then you've put together through experiments. You can put it all together and and draw conclusions. So I have kids who are entering that and then kind of like in the midst of it deeply, who come to me and said, Mother, I just need you to tell me that it's okay that I put this book down. And for avid readers, that's really hard.
Yeah.
For me, I'm like, no, I have so many books. I don't read fast enough. This isn't worth my time. I'll put it down and it's done. But for somebody who's a very fast reader and an avid reader, that's like cheating or doing some evil deed to the author.
The commitment to the book like it's a human, like it's a person, right?
And so then it's like, well, tell me about this. Tell me about what's going on in the book. What's bothering you? And oftentimes I was loving the series up until the 4th book. And then all of a sudden they made this one person turn, lesbian or gay, or they shove an agenda down your throat, and it just totally ruins the whole story. So there's conversations that can happen like that because you've earned their trust. And that's the biggest issue. Like teens are realizing that you're a sinner, whereas preteens still don't necessarily see you as a sinful human.
Yeah, right.
And so it's a really tough time to recognize that essentially your little g God has fallen.
Yeah, right.
And where does that put me as a human if I have this sinful human leading me? And how do I submit to them? So the more time that we take to invest in who our child is rather than just wag our finger at them, the better. Also, I read an article a while back about how a lot of times when teens come to you, they don't necessarily want you to tell them how to fix their problems. Mm-hmm. A lot of times they need somebody just to listen. They need somebody to vent to. And reading other books, it's like, sometimes venting isn't really the best thing, but they just... It's somebody going down the road.
I thought it was a cat.
It's
oh my goodness.
Racing on the road night in Rockford. Woo. Come up from school. How was your day? You look like something's bothering you. And they start talking to you about their best friend and how their best friend is going to ask the guy that they thought was really cute to the prom, and that just broke their heart. You could be like, oh, well, the prom's stupid. You don't need that, blah, blah, blah. Or you can listen.
Hear the pain.
And hear them and say, wow, honey, I know that must be really hard for you. And don't necessarily go into a story about yourself or when you experienced it, but just ask prying questions that then can lead to them talking more about their emotions. What period was it when you found this out? Or how did your friend approach this guy? Or where'd you see this guy? What class is he in?
What that takes is an active disinterest in your own interest and a desire to see what they're capable of showing interest in, which, because they're younger than you, is going to be really, really, really below you. And as a parent, as a mother especially, I think, but as a parent, to see that as your role, your job, and to, not that you would be to come down to their level. You're not supposed to go to their level, but you're supposed to see the level they're at and then engage them. And think
about, this is lame, but think about one of the movies that touched you in this kind of a scenario and be that parent to that child. What movie did you watch where you saw a parent do something that you're like, wow, I wish my parent had done that to me when I was in that situation? Well, be that to your kid today.
Yeah, I don't think you need the movie to just know, like just to imagine what was it that you looked for. Then
And
again, I don't know.
maybe your parent was amazing, and so imitate them.
Absolutely. if
And
that's the
carry that
case.
forward.
Absolutely, if that's the case. We have a sound break. And a little time for AskMadChristianMondays.com. Questions about the Bible. We will answer them here. Send them to madpxm.com/contact. Don't have any this week, so not sure what to talk about in terms of that. But we got more coming on the other side of this break. Isn't that fun? Isn't that fun? I knew that was coming. I knew it was coming. Did I tell you before the show it was coming? I told you before the show it was
Yeah,
coming.
you told me.
I can probably do this all over again. It was only, 30 seconds?
Yeah, you got it.
was-
I have complete confidence in your
no,
ability
well,
to.
I need a button. Redfist.com. I want to tell you all about how if you like what we do at StarFall 2029, if you like what I, Jonathan, do with Brief History of Power, with Hebron Collegium, with St. Paul Lutheran Church, then RevFist.com is the place to go to support me. First, subscribe to the newsletter. Second, be a paid subscriber to the newsletter for starting at what? It's actually free. You can put in whatever you want. You can get $2 a month, $8 a month, whatever. You will get access to a pretty tree. So it's all there for free before you would do this. But by joining the team, again, you're making it so that we can continue to produce these things for you for free. So redfist.com, be a paying subscriber, or go to subscribestar.com or become a paying subscriber at revfisk.com. with all that excitement, I failed to tell you about all the good stuff that you could find at redfist.com this past week. So on Tuesday, there was an article on StarFall. That's exciting. But on Wednesday, a piece on J.R.R. Tolkien in his own words, maker, wanderer, bard. On Thursday, a piece I'm going to talk about here in a moment on latchkey kid syndrome in the 1980s and 90s and beyond. And today, a pretty lengthy piece on cryptocurrency and why you should care. Next Monday, I got a piece of bioepic coming out on one of the front runners for the presidency of the United States this coming 2024 called We Are Doing. You don't want to miss that one. You don't want to miss We Are Doing. I got a big piece planned for next Thursday on Lutheranism and a piece for Friday on abstinence and sexual energy in mythology. What? Redfist.com. Yeah, subscribe for free and be a paying subscriber because you want to be. I just did this bit. And we're going to go talk about holding on to pain as protection. First, a little bit from a few weeks back. Have you been making an active effort on your quest number 8.9.24 to scatter the scatterer, or to take the stories, which are the seeds of the Word of God, from Matthew chapter 13 and throw them out there into the world, to scatter the seed, to leave the tares, to expect sparrows, to trust the leaven, to buy that field, to seek pearls, and to remember net metaphors. This week it fell apart. I got scatter the seed out there. I think I said leave the tares. I know I said trust the leaven. Ooh, sparrows were around, but after that it kind of fell apart for me a little bit. So continuing that quest, seeding your stories. Meredith, how did you do on that? Are you playing along?
I'm trying to. Yeah, I don't know that I did as well. I haven't. I've been a listener this week. Yeah. Less of a speaker.
Well, again, for the sake of the game doesn't take much. It just means you would drop that phrase, scatter the seed, somewhere as a statement that you know would fit, and to know that you've quoted Jesus. And just to do it and see if these stories, these metaphors of the seed, the tares, the sparrows, the leaven, the field, the pearl, and the net are not useful tools for having valuable conversations with everybody you know. You know, when you need that thing to say back after they've talked about the kid in third period who did the thing with the phone to the boyfriend that made him not the boyfriend anymore, you can say, well, leave the tears. Leave the tears. Of course, that might be fixing it. We're not supposed to fix it. But I want to talk about holding on to pain as protection and the role of isolation in children born after 1960, 1970, definitely in the 1980s. In the 1980s, the term latchkey kid became widely recognized as referring to children that had extended periods of alone time because of both parents working. I'll go ahead and raise my hand. These children had to navigate a range of experiences without immediate support from a supervising adult, even though babysitters and after-school programs, of course, tend to present as though they do provide supervision and support. They do not provide supervision and support. And the latchkey kids would end up being at home alone anyway. And you know, so whether you have the babysitter situation where you got, 10 kids in a house and the sitter's watching TV herself, so how much is she really watching the kids? Or whether the kids are at home, the experiences are very similar, except that, again, I guess, pack dynamic. But for a young boy growing up as a latchkey kid during this time, the act of holding on to pain can be understood as a form of self-protection and adaptation to an environment where vulnerability, isolation, and overwhelm children that were left alone had to develop coping mechanisms to manage their environment. So part of this, again, it comes out of the isolation. Even in a group, the kids kind of been alone. Latchkey kids experience a significant amount of solitude, amplifying feelings of abandonment. For a young boy specifically, such isolation could lead to senses of vulnerability, making his world unpredictable and unsafe. And in such a context, holding on to a pain or pains that he experiences of isolation become a way to maintain control over his world. That is, the hurt of being alone, being grabbed as a form of his identity, can be used to become the one constant in his life, even though that only constant is hurt. exposure to adult themes is kind of unavoidable if the kid's got a tool in his hands. At the time, the 1980s, it was mainly cable TV and HBO late-night movies. But nonetheless, exposure to adult themes was the norm for latchkey kids, even if they weren't watching rated R or NC-17 films, because the media that they saw without supervision certainly had adult themes in it, even if it was not pornography. And these themes, such as sex before marriage and godless relationships, godless mindsets, were presented to them before an age when they can emotionally or cognitively process what they're seeing. I do remember myself watching the movie Splash at a neighbor's house. I don't remember understanding much of it. Premature exposure creates confusion, shame, fear, emotions that a young boy generally may not know how to express or resolve himself. And since he's already been isolated and has no superiors to look to help, holding on to these feelings becomes the only way to protect himself from confusion and the perceived dangers of the adult world that he's afraid of entering. It's as if by internalizing the pain and keeping it close, he shields himself from more direct or external threats. Why am I sharing this? Oh, because I don't think I'm alone in having this experience growing up in this America. I don't think everyone had the same experience I do. But I think that the defense mechanism of pain is one that many depressed people probably know all too well. Pain acts as a defense mechanism, creating an emotional barrier that then keeps such people, the young boy we're talking about, from engaging fully in the world, because the world is always seen as harmful or neglectful. Holding on to the pain, he unconsciously will build walls to protect himself from emotional harm. And of course, escaping into the screen is the easiest way to do that. This mechanism can manifest as emotional numbness, detachment, or a deep-seated mistrust of others. And if the pain becoming familiar, if uncomfortable companion, will be clung to because it guards him against a lack of identity. During childhood and adolescence, identity formation is crucial, is what we were just talking about, Meredith. For a young boy growing up on his own, the pain he holds becomes entwined with his sense of self. He identifies himself as his pain and sees it as who he is. This is part of the development of that 3 to 6 year old age, and it isn't really something you undo. This is particularly true if the pain was then amplified by a significant event during such times in childhood. Exposure to adult themes being only the tip of the iceberg. Oftentimes, children that are left in latchkey situations are taken advantage of by older siblings, neighbors, and whatnot. Even then, it amplifies the pain, which is a reminder of the experience of isolation, fear, and the untrustworthiness of others. That is, the pain anchors the individual to the past, and he seeks to remember the source of the pain as a way of preserving the identity. Now, if I can kind of jump out of the document and into my own head for my wife's learning right now, like in real time, I think what that means is that I don't even, I've always tried to remember what caused the pain.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing caused the pain. I chose to remember the pain to avoid the pain. That was it. There's no great moment. It is me attempting to get my mom not to leave the room. I know that. It is that. But after it became that, that's all it was. Tomorrow I will be more of something, whatever it is, doesn't matter. And that pain that I will be more, just sort of became Jonathan. Really all Jonathan was, except for when Jonathan was in Skyrim or Mega Man or watching Star Wars. Then I'm just what everybody else is. We're dreaming, But when Jonathan was awake, then he was back in this place of running from a pain that he needed to remember, that he was afraid to remember, because if he remembered it, then he'd have to stop being who he is. And that's it. It's like a game in my childhood head with the boogeyman in the closet and my mom downstairs in her shop and me not understanding any of it. Being a latchkey kid like many others. The process of letting go of this kind of pain is challenging because it's integral to the identity of the person. Letting go is to lose a part of oneself or to step into a world where you are no longer who you were. This can keep most people stuck in a cycle where they hold on to the pain more tightly, even when it no longer serves positive function in their life.
Such challenges become, the challenge then becomes finding a way to release the pain in a safe manner. For a young boy growing up as a latchkey kid in the 1980s, and yeah, that is me, holding on to pain as a form of protection is a complex and multifaceted experience. It's been a way of coping with my isolation, my premature exposure to adult themes, and the general sense of vulnerability that came with being left to navigate the adult world on my own at a young age. Understanding such dynamics is crucial for my own development as a Christian, as a husband, as a father, as an adult, as a pastor, to unravel the layers of protection that I set up with pain as my identity and embrace suffering as glory, leading toward a greater healing in the cross of my King, Jesus Christ. So, for that, what it's worth to those out there who need it, I think you do, and I know you do when you hear it. So somebody left, I repost things different places, and I put that entire thing out as one tweet on Twitter, and there was a comment that was, I can't remember it exactly, but it said something like, "I'm not going to say more on Twitter, but thank you." Nice. It was kind of a deep hit there. So, and let me just express there at this moment too, that article, if you read that article, it really demonstrates the power of ChatGPT 4.0 as a language model. I'm almost done talking about AI because people think AI is one thing and it's just not. And so I don't know what other people are using. Working with ChatGPT, I mean, what that was developed out of an hour-long conversation between me and Chat about psychology. And then I had it write it up as a summary, and then there you go. This isn't just someone said, you just spit this stuff into the AI and it spits it out and you print. No, no, AI is like having a conversation like you're talking about with the kids, only it's with a computer. And the computer's kind of a dumb robot sometimes, but it has a lot of knowledge too. And so coaxing out of it and understanding is a process. And I found it to be by far one of the best psychologists I've ever talked to. I mean, just it can't really understand me or anything like that, but it can talk about concepts with an understanding that's just stunning. And so, what am I saying here? I'm saying that what I hope you see and get from me through all of this use of language modeling tools for the creation of revfist.com and the publication of the gospel in as many avenues as possible is me inviting you to believe that we live at a time where there's enough change taking place. There's enough tools at your fingertips that using what you have with intention and in prayer under Christ will give you an advantage over and against your enemies who are the enemies of the gospel of Jesus Christ. I believe firmly that. And I believe that you're listening to this right now because we're not alone. Whatever isolation I may carry in my person, and I do, and I probably will to the grave so far as my psyche is concerned, I also have a greater hope that is, well, it is you. It is us. It is the body of Christ. And while you can call it mystical, it's not mystical. We're all here. We're not a platonic dream. We're just spread throughout the world and divided over all sorts of varying issues. And of course, there's the Pope and on and on and on, right? But we're the church. We are the church of Jesus Christ. We are the people of God. We are the sons of Israel. We are the heirs to David's throne. We are the heirs to Abraham's faith. What are we waiting for? What are we afraid of for such a time as this? I was supposed to talk this last summer with Dr. Adam Kuntz in Iowa. Hopefully we'll get to do it in the future. We were supposed to talk about obstacles to evangelism and the difficulty of, well, Lutheranism, really. What is it that has kept the Lutheran Church shrinking for, I don't know, better part of a century, 75 years or so? And what might we do to cease having such a meager showing? And, I don't think that's a question that's going to get answered at a conference usually, right? And that Dr. Coons and I were invited to answer such a question really shows the respect that other people give us. And so I'm honored by that. But I do think that the topic is worth talking about, even though I'm convinced that it so if addressing the issue of evangelism is not the same as addressing the issue of why Lutheranism is shrinking. I just don't think they're the same issue. Lutheranism is shrinking because we don't like kids. We don't have kids. The kids we have, we don't raise. We send them to schools that don't make them Lutherans, and then we send them off to schools that make them less Lutheran. And it's so like we don't have kids and we don't like our kids. So that's why we're not growing. And a large majority of us do not desire to be married and have kids as a primary goal out of life. So why would we grow? But conversion to Christianity, that's a whole nother thing. And notice how I just did that there. I didn't say evangelism. I said conversion. Conversion. So one of the first things I want to say about obstacles to evangelism is that the problem of Babel is the obstacle. The problem of language that does not carry the spirit meant by the speaker, but instead carries a confusion with it. And that trying to say what you mean but not being able to hinders all forms of communication and conversion, understanding. And so I think that saying evangelism is in fact confusing because it doesn't tell us what we're even doing, what we're after. What we want to get with the obstacles out of the way of is the obstacles to conversion. There aren't obstacles to speaking the gospel. There are obstacles to people believing the gospel. Conversion. And that conversion, being a better word than evangelism, gets at the issue that Babel is an obstacle we got to overcome. We got to speak clearly about what we believe if we want others to join us in believing it. Now, there's a lot more there, but that was just point one of the talk. Point two of the talk, and there's only three, and I'm not going to do the whole talk. But point two, what's in the way? Point one, what's in the way of conversion? Babel. Point two, what's in the way of conversion? Lutheranism, the pawn of the Antichrist. And I'll prove it to you because none of us think the Antichrist anymore. And so we really are the history fools for the thing. Go read the treatise on the power and the primacy of the Pope in the Book of Concord and then tell me you know what Lutheranism is. And if you haven't ever read it, then you don't know what Lutheranism is. Except for, let me tell you this, Lutheranism, whenever you see that ism, the ISM at the end of it, it means it's its own religion that's not Christianity. It's one thing to be a Lutheran. It's another thing to confess the Oxford Confession, and it's another thing to believe in Lutheranism. Let me suggest you don't want to be a pawn of the Antichrist. Be a Lutheran, and don't forget who you were, but notice who we aren't anymore. Man, there's a lot under that hood. The third one is Gnosticism, which is communism, which is Platonism, which is made up anti-Christianity. It's just falling prey to ideas that sound great because we dreamt them and then letting them, in fact, lead us into doing them when they're, in fact, bad ideas because they're not rooted in reality. And this is the worship of knowledge. It leads to the hatred of the orders because as you worship knowledge, you'll find it limits you and you won't like that, so you'll hate the orders. And then, of course, Gnosticism at its fullest expression in every era leads to a confusion of the sexes, which is fascinating. So, yeah, there you go. Obstacles to evangelism. Things we need to overcome as Christians. Things for you to pray that Jesus would help you see your way through. That we live in a time of Babylon-ing. And we want to convert people not to Lutheranism, but to Christ and his word. And that the thing that's most in the way of this is us thinking we know so much about it. And it's all a matter of intellectual assent, when it is in fact a spiritual sickness to be healed by a promise spoken to the person by someone else who, well, they hear. He who has ears in all this, he who has ears. We got one more break here and another section coming up. So we're almost done, but not done. Stick around. It is time for your weekly Jiu-Jitsu moment with the Hebron Collegium. The Hebron Collegium is a gap year Bible school for men in Rockford, Illinois, connected to St. Paul Lutheran Church, sba15.org for the church, hebroncollegium.org for the school. It's a boot camp for male Christian living, a place for young men between high school and college, between college and seminary, or between college and life, to come and set their trajectory for righteousness by discovering the power of psalmic prayer, proverbial contemplation, deep biblical reading, a library of good things, and a little time wrestling with some other guys, getting that brotherhood, that fraternity that maybe they missed out on growing up. Maybe not. Maybe they got it to share. Maybe it's time to build a team. That's indeed what the place is for. Got 4 students this coming fall. Room for more in this year. Quarter and spring quarters set up. Also, you are welcome to come even if you're not going to be a student. Adult men as well. It is a spiritual retreat center for you to step out of the noise, put down the phone, take a breath, see the sunshine, and again discover the value of the Word of God and the fraternity and fellowship that the Christian church does have with each other. You got to visit to believe. No one leaves unchanged. And with that regard, then, I want to ask you to consider being a supporter of the Hebron Collegium with your prayers, with your understanding, and with your congregational support. The Hebron Collegium operates on a budget of under $20,000 a year. 20 congregations or individuals committed to $1,000 a year ensure that we'll be able to offer this free gift to young men year by year well into the future. You can reach out at rifus.com if you are interested in helping, or you can just keep listening and praying as you do. And then you'll learn a little bit more about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is what we're going to talk about now. I've done it long enough. My kids have done it long enough. Meredith has watched it long enough that we're probably competent to talk about it some. And so I figure it's about time I start sharing with the world what I love so much about Jiu-Jitsu. We've done it before, but you always got to pry it out of me. So I'm gonna start acting like I know what I'm talking about now, even though I am but a lowly blue. I know enough now to know, well, you'd have to step on the mat and find out, I suppose, and then you would know. So what I want to do today is talk about 2 things. I want to talk about the overhook versus the underhook, which if you have no idea about jiu-jitsu, it doesn't matter. You'll know about the overhook and the underhook by the time we're done. And that's the point, is I just want you to expose you to the terminology. And then when we're talking about that, we're going to talk about the way the human body works as a series of levers and fulcrums that by understanding that's how jiu-jitsu works. And personally, I find that part super exciting. I had a conversation on the mat with a classmate, the other day. He kept telling me I was wasting my time just talking about it, but I find it super exciting to think about the body as a series of levers. So overhook versus the underhook. If you go to a Brazilian jiu-jitsu class, most academies, you'll find out that there is sort of a scattered shotgun approach to your learning. And while they have systems, the system's going to keep moving with or without you, and you're going to have to pick up terminology and other things as they go. You also find out that each school has its own terms, that there are many, many so-called moves that are developed by individuals. That is, they figured out that they could do this, this, and this in this one random situation, and now they call it like the meat grinder, bungle hopper, super snatch, or whatever whatever it is. And so there's that kind of move, and there's lots of them. And then there's the stuff that's like everywhere, because it's the stuff. It's the old stuff. It's the things you can do. and one of these is the overhook, and one of them is the underhook. And they're incredibly powerful, even because if you end up in a situation where you are assaulted by somebody, the simplest thing to do to protect yourself is to get an overhook. The way you would do this is you would cover your face while the person's about to hit you. And as they're swinging at you, you try to pummel yourself into their chest, right? So if you can imagine someone swinging to punch at you, and instead of going away from them, you cover your face and you just dive at their chest. Once you hit their chest, you take one arm, either arm, doesn't matter, and you put it over their arm, under their armpit, and back inside to their chest. That's called the overhook. Over their arm, under their armpit, and you just press. And you have their shoulder. You have their shoulder. If they don't know what they're doing, you really have their shoulder. If they know what they're doing, you have their shoulder pretty well. That turn of your shoulder into their shoulder when you grip it is the power there. And that's where then the lever system comes into play. I want to talk about that a little bit. So your body is made up of a series of levers built onto a core. Your core has 4 corners like the earth, 2 shoulders, 2 hips. Those are the power points of your body. If you want to move somebody, use your hips, power center. But these power centers are attached to these to levers that reach out, these extensions, your arms and your legs, that extend off of these 4 corners. Each of these corners is a point in the lever that has 3 parts to it. So you have my shoulder, my elbow, and my wrist. So I have 4, but actually I have 12 when you put it all together. Right, as it extends out from me, you add 8 more. And if you have the wrist and you turn it the right way, the elbow will have to go with it. And if you do that, the shoulder will have to go with it. And that's jiu-jitsu. That's the leverage. That's the fulcrum issue. That you begin to see that, oh, I want to move your whole body. Well, if I move your wrist, it'll move your elbow. That'll move your shoulder. That'll move your neck. That'll move your body. And it doesn't take much. Now, again, an overhook is quite a powerful move. It is much, but it's putting these insights into practice. You're using the elbow actually to trap it, and then putting pressure from the elbow directly onto the shoulder, which enables them to move their entire form. Now, you can go even further with this, because then you have like your hands. So from your wrist, you then have 20 more. If we take your core, now you have your fingers and toes. You're replicating your arm leg scenario with joints of 20 times between your toes and your fingers. So you have another, like, I'm pointing for Meredith, like a shoulder, elbow, wrist on the end of each finger, right? Mm-hmm. That then you can do the same thing, where if you get that far joint and tweak it, the joint moves, the finger moves, the wrist moves, the elbow moves, the shoulder moves, right? Steven Seagal, if you know that guy, I believe, is what that. Jiu-jitsu doesn't quite teach that, but it's playing with that concept again. Now, I did a little more kind of like digging today, how you have the 12 points of your extremities followed by your 20 digits that are extended joints between your 20 digits and your fingers. You got 60 joints. It's crazy. So I was like, okay, yeah, but what's between my knuckle hand? I always have been told there's a lot of bones in your hand. It's craziness. Okay. There are 10 bones between your wrist and every single finger. So that means that you add 40 more bones between both hands and both feet, between your fingers and your wrists and your ankles and your toes. Yeah. Isn't it amazing? Now,
Yeah.
jiu-jitsu doesn't really go at those, although I know if you squeeze someone in the middle of the hand, it hurts. So the overhook is when you got your arm over their arm and under their armpit. Because when you have your arm under their armpit and just latched on somehow. So the goal of the conversation is to distinguish the overhook and the underhook for the sake of future conversation for your jiu-jitsu knowledge. The overhook is powerful in a self-defense situation where you can crash into their chest and simply grab their arm to gain enough control to maybe get to their back and push them away or something like that. The underhook, however, is the power of jiu-jitsu in jiu-jitsu. And that is to get under someone's arm is to not so much control their shoulder as to have their back. But between the two, it really is a matter of where are you and what do you need to do at this moment. So they're both powerful in their own way. And when your coach is saying, get the overhook, right? With your arm, he might need to say, with your left arm, so you can get the underhook with your right arm. But if you don't know what either of them are, you won't know what to do at all. And now you know a little bit about the overhook and the underhook with the Hebron Kaligi. Oh, we got just a few moments left here, Meredith. How do you want to close up tonight? You want to talk about something else? I got a final closer, but give you a chance to say hello and goodbye. And
That's really thoughtful. We kind of talked about all of the things that I had deep on my heart tonight. Something that I guess there's one topic that I'd been thinking about. In past episodes, I mentioned Cinderella as being a story that has a sweet meaning to me. When Disney came out with the live action Cinderella, it was I just was so excited. And then I felt like, wow, they really did a good job sticking with the theme that it wasn't Brothers Grimm, it was Hans Christian Andersen who wrote Cinderella. Kind of had in his original story, and that is at the end she forgives the evil stepmother and stepsisters, and that's shown in this live action. So anyway, I've been thinking about what makes Cinderella so compelling as a heroine, and it's not because she's beautiful. It's not because she can tame animals. It's not because she is very kind to all of those around her. And so that is one of the traits. But her kindness